So what do you think about the truckers with the cost of oil?
I don't think that's ever going to go away. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that truckers get to the point where they park all the rigs and we all starve to death. That ain't going to happen.
Okay.
What is going to happen, what will happen instead, is the price will go up. And that again, we're back to okay. So if you have some heritage seeds and you've got some, I'm sitting here in my office. I've got a couple of cans of, uh, you know, hermetically sealed cans of. Let me see what these are. This one is a fall garden, and over here, this is 2 pounds of organic alfalfa seeds, 8 ounces of organic broccoli, 8 ounces of organic radish. I mean, we're talking seeds here. Just this one, the alfalfa seeds, is approximately 532,000 plants worth, depending on germination rate. I mean, they're big cans.
Wow.
Um, I'm lucky. I've got room to plant this stuff, and I can go down to the local feed store and I can buy 50-pound sack of rye seeds, and by next spring I'll have the happiest, fattest deer in the world. Um, and it will, depending on what you put into your soil, you can actually improve the soil on a piece of property depending on what you plant. Like putting uh, beans in or peanuts and things like that. You can actually fix nitrogen back in the soil. So it's a whole different skill set, and it's not nearly as much fun as texting, the hot member of the opposite sex. But if you're a young person and you want to continue eating for the next 40 years, then things like the SAS Survival Handbook and the different field books on how to forage for plants and so forth, uh, seems to me that we're in a period where we've got 7 billion people trying to turn into 8 billion people, and we've got limited resource, and we know prices are going to go up. So your choice is you either grow your own local or you are held as a victim to wherever the price goes based on limited resource. And it doesn't seem to be a real hard choice to me to at least begin doing some hobby farming while it's still possible. I'm sure everybody remembers, the people in Iraq were forced to buy American seeds, and they were explicitly told, no, you can't just grow anything you want anymore. Well, that's the part of the world that's broken. That's the part of suppressing human potential. People forget that corn started off as plain old grass, and it was just bred over centuries by earlier peoples who figured out that they could build bigger and bigger grass seeds, and as those seed pods were bred bigger and bigger, today we have corn and we don't think anything about it. Yet most corn is certainly not original, naturally occurring stuff. It's a slow process of human invention and working in concert with nature rather than working out of phase with it.
Yeah, I've been doing my learning curve with my garden, and I think making mistakes is the best thing to be doing right now because then you learn. But my next question is kind of about crops in the U.S. Because recently they said there was a bumper crop projections of U.S. harvests, but then kind of reality came in when the crops are coming in that have been affected by droughts and floods, and grain seems to be particularly hard hit. And I'm hearing about cattle farmers feeding wheat because they can't get or afford corn. I think there's mandates that gasoline in most states must be part ethanol, which is made from corn. And also considering that corn or corn syrup is in most American foods, how do you see this playing out?
Don't get me started on HF CS. You know what that is, right? High fructose corn syrup,
Oh, yeah.
poison. Now, I know somebody's going to call up or write in and go, "You're as an idiot because he doesn't like high fructose corn syrup." Well, some people like me are extraordinarily sensitive, allergy-wise, to things that don't spin the right direction. And high fructose corn syrup, I get allergic reactions to because I'm allergic to some kinds of corn. And I've actually had to go to the hospital back when some Starlink leaked into the public food supplies. This was, oh gosh, I want to say 10 years ago. But that stuff, anything that's genetically modified is dangerous as hell. As for the prices, part of the price in commodities right now is unpredictable because we're still seeing the effects of MF Global's debacle. We don't know how much of that trading was done by legitimate manufacturers of foodstuffs who were simply trying to hedge future supply prices for their products, or how much of that was because of Chinese coming in and and they'll do this, every year. They'll come in and buy huge quantities of rice and corn and so forth. And remember the part earlier where I was saying we need to kick all lobbyists of any kind out of Washington, take their checkbooks away, burn their checkbooks, disband their organizations, and go back to being a people-driven government instead of a checkbook government. That's where your methanol is coming from. Methanol out here in ranching country is not well thought of. And the reason it's not is some equipment on a ranch, you only use 3 or 4 months out of the year. Like, this is chainsaw season for us because it's the time of the year when trees blow over. And every frigging year, I end up taking my Husqvarna 455 Rancher to my local Husqvarna 455 Rancher repair shop where the carburetor gets torn apart. It gets cleaned out because the methanol turns to varnish in only 3 or 4 months. It becomes significantly more difficult to burn. Now, this year I'm getting ahead of the problem. Having gotten back into flying, I'll simply go stock up a large drum of 100 octane low lead avgas, which will burn just fine in my farm machinery. And I won't have to worry about it turning to varnish quite so fast. And I can get some gas stabilizer, Stable makes one and a few others, and you can actually increase the shelf life of it. So in terms of looking at crops, yeah, crops are kind of like unemployment reports. They may sound good for the market, but what you see when you read the fine print is you'll see, crops came in at 102% of whatever compared with last year. But if you read the footnotes, you see only 95% of the acreage was planted this year. So one figure for the public is crop production is great. And the reality is there's less bushels of stuff coming in, but it's the same kind of reporting methodology the Soviets managed to pioneer in making things look good while people were starving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Green Meadow, and thank you, George. We are speaking with George Ure. Please help support him by visiting his website, urbansurvival.com, and consider becoming a subscriber to peoplenomics.com. I can tell you from personal experience, it's well worth the small subscription fee. George, I first learned of you back at the University of Colorado boards, and back then, at that time, there was a lot of discussion in regard to the Kondratiev wave. Some aspects of debt deflation, a key component of the Kondratiev cycle, have been popping up, from bad debts associated with bad mortgages and other loans to potentially now bad sovereign debt. Yet the debt as money system continues to try to prop up the collapsing Ponzi scheme. from your assessment, where are we in the long count? And while hopefully most listening know about this, perhaps you could very briefly describe that as well.
Me very briefly describing anything
Okay.
could cause a new religion to be formed.
Let's let them go off and Wikipedia the Kondratiev cycle for themselves.
Well, let me give it to you the short version, because it really is very much on point. The Kondratiev wave was a series of observations made by a fellow by the name of Nicholas Kondratiev, who looked at prices of grains. In fact, I've got one of his publications here, article from the Review of Economic Statistics, volume 17, number 6 of November 1935, pages 105 to 115. How about that? What he did is he looked, well, here's a chart that he did of coal production and consumption from 1830 to 1910. Elsewhere, he goes back and looks at index numbers of commodity prices that he reconstructed from 1780 through 1920, and a lot of other nice, neat charts like that. And what the dude notices is over a fairly regular period of 48 to 64 years, prices regularly spike and then regularly decline, such that from heartbeat to heartbeat, if you will, is this roughly 50-year period. The Kondratiev cycle suggests that at least in earlier economic history, things like the biblical Jubilee year, where all debts are forgiven, had some pretty good basis in fact, and that if you want more, you can read the book of Leviticus, although the money changers who have taken over the church may not like the idea of giving up interest. So I guess that's one of those ongoing themes, if you will, across great spans of history, is that there's always money changers around, and they may not always have the best interests of purer spirits at heart. How's that for subtle?
It's on mark.
So fast forward, Kondratiev predicted to Joseph Stalin, for whom he worked, in the mid-1920s, that the U.S. was going to have the worst depression the world had ever seen, and Stalin was thrilled with that. And then Kondratiev said, but did I tell you they'll be back bigger and stronger than ever? And sure enough, we did. And for thinking that way and daring to say it to Joe the Butcher, Kondratiev was sent off to a labor camp in Siberia. The reason that you ran across me and folks like Howard Hill and Steve Swaim and Tom Drake and a bunch of others in the 1990s discussing Kondratiev long-wave theory was that something is wrong with the long wave here recently. It should have collapsed into a second depression in 1987 or so, which would be roughly 50 years after the 1929 event. Or it should have collapsed with the economic stagnation period of the 1990s, which was addressed by starting up Gulf War I, and then it should have arrived when the internet bubble blew up following the year 2000, and we sank into the really the very edge of global depression in late 2001, but almost too conveniently from an economics perspective,